Are we all crazy? So if you think about mental illness in general, you might think about a few things. You might think about hearing voices in your head. You might think about having distorted views of the world. You might think about having emotions that don't necessarily match what's going on, so feeling excessively sad or excessively happy. What if I told you that even though a lot of us don't necessarily fit into those criteria, we do have a lot of those traits. We are all kind of mentally ill in some ways, and it is causing a lot of pain for a lot of us. And the minute that you actually realize that craziness in yourself, and the craziness can be even in the sanest people in terms of like medical diagnosis, but once you realize that craziness that is inside you, it can be very freeing. So now what I'm saying might not make any sense, so let me just go a little bit more deeply into it. So you probably all have this little voice inside your head, right? Which most of us identify as it's my voice, it's me thinking, it's my thoughts. What if I told you that that little voice that you hear inside your head all the time, that you think is you, isn't necessarily you? It isn't who you are. So if you were to remove that little voice, if that little voice wasn't in your head anymore, would that mean that you wouldn't be you? And I argue that you would still be you, just like if you lost your hand, you would lose a part of what helps you do your things, but you would still be you even if you didn't have your hand. So if it isn't you, who are you if you're not those thoughts, right? Because when we think about who we are, okay, if I lose my arm, I'm still me. If I lose, my leg, I'm still me. But as long as I have those thoughts, we think usually I'm myself. So who am I if I'm not those thoughts? I am the awareness that notices those thoughts. So that's the main thing. So I can't be those thoughts because I am aware of those thoughts. So if I am aware of those thoughts, I can't be the thoughts. I am the awareness that is aware of those thoughts. And this might sound very crazy and make no sense, but bear with me a little bit more and it should make more and more sense as you listen. The mind, so all the thoughts that we have, is a very useful tool. It helps us be organized, it helps us go through complex math problems, trying to develop a new medicine or trying to come up with some innovative, creative business ideas or stuff like that. It helps us do a bunch of stuff, but it also does so much disruptive negative stuff. And so I don't think that the mind or that thoughts are good or bad necessarily, but I think that the mind is just often being used for very negative things. So if your mind isn't you, then and I said, who are we if the mind isn't who we are? We are the awareness. So what is the mind then if it's not us, if we're that awareness? The mind is different things. So the mind is basically, like I said, it's a tool, but it gets activated by different things. So one very obvious thing that will kind of trigger those thoughts or your mind to go is simply conditioning. So if I say 1, 2, 3, a lot of you probably thought 4, 5, 6, right? So 4, 5, 6, it was just conditioned. It's something that, your memories kind of get activated, and that's what triggers those thoughts. If I say, for example, twinkle, twinkle, you probably think little star. Once again, that's an example of how you can have thoughts that are simply conditioned. Now, there's other things that can trigger you to think about things, different things that you perceive in the environment. So for example, if you're driving home from work and you see, I don't know, like an ad for pizza, you might think, oh, I'll have pizza for supper. So it's not that you created those thoughts, it's something in the environment that triggered the thoughts to come. And so there's a mix of perception and memories that will trigger those thoughts. But there's also some things that are kind of within us, but that are not us, that trigger a lot of these thoughts. And that's where the problem comes in. So we all have this part of us, and let's call that part of us the ego. And the ego, basically, what it is, it's this part of us that is always wanting and wanting more. And it really wants to make sure that we distinguish ourselves socially, that we have an identity, that we kind of are someone special or someone great, that everybody recognizes and loves. And that part of us, that ego, it's never satisfied. It always wants more. So whether that part of you will want you to find ways to identify yourself, so as simple as my name is Amelia in my case, or I like chocolate, or I don't know, animal rights are important for me, or anything that you like or you dislike, or anything that you stand for, the ego really likes that because it really wants you to create an identity. But more than that, it wants you to gain social standing. It wants others to notice how great you are. So the ego is that part of you that always wants you to achieve more material possessions, like have a house, have a car, have titles, have a degree, have just a title in general. I'm the manager and this and that. It's that part of you that wants to always achieve, have more, win a prize, or have more Instagram followers, or have more people that like you. And that part of you, the ego, the problem with it is that it will often go and cause a bunch of thoughts in your mind. So throughout the day, you'll often have many thoughts that will be kind of triggered by that part of you that we'll call the ego right here. So whether it be you have a chat with someone and then you say something and you think, oh, maybe that wasn't so smart, and then you start beating yourself up. Why the hell did I say that? That sounded so stupid, blah, 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 blah. So that's the ego causing those thoughts. Or if someone cuts you in the car and then you get super pissed off, how dare they cut me? Like, who do they think they are? Once again, that's also the ego. It's trying to have that little social standing, trying to bring someone else down and bring themselves up. And if you really start to notice your thoughts, you'll notice how many times a day all those disruptive thoughts come from that part of you, that ego that wants to be above others, and how that those thoughts in that part of you, that ego, will actually control so many decisions and so many things that you do. But here is where the craziness starts. It's that this part of you, like I said, that ego that always wants you to be more, achieve more, it's never satisfied. So even if you have the highest degree, you have the most awesome material possessions, you have a bunch of friends, you have, absolutely everything you could ever dream of, it's never going to be satisfied. It might be satisfied for 1 second or a little while, but it's always going to want you to do more and be more and achieve more. And it's always going to have, you're always going to have that feeling as if something is missing. So here you can just think of celebrities and how, unfortunately, how many of them, not many, well, yeah, a good number of them end up committing suicide, or end up having some drug consumption issues, whether it be alcohol or other drugs. So what happens in those cases is that basically there's this ego, this pit feeling that they're trying to fill. And in their case, pretty much everything that you can think of to fill in that gap or that void is filled, basically, right? Because they can pretty much buy anything that they want. They are socially recognized by everyone. They have, a title, a social standing, they have friends, they have parties, they have access to, they can pretty much travel to anywhere in the world where they want. And then they are still stuck with that pit feeling. And so because they're stuck with that feeling that there's a lack or that there's something missing, and the ego is saying there's something still missing, but basically everything they can think of in terms of material possessions, in terms of titles, in terms of social recognitions, it's been ticked. Now that's when they go crazy, right? Because then there's nothing else that they can strive towards to try to fill in that gap. And that makes that pit feeling or that feeling of lack even worse because they can't distract themselves by thinking about something else that they could try to achieve to make that void feel better. And that's the craziness I'm talking about. And that's what I mean when I'm saying that your mind isn't helping you, because your mind is often being dominated by this part of you. And the minute you realize that, the minute you realize that part of you that always wants more and more and wants to be more and achieve more will never be satisfied, the minute you realize that it's impossible, that's when you start being free, and that's when you start becoming able to be truly happy, because then you can realize how useless it is trying to fill that void, and you can just let it go. And then once you let it go, you're a lot more able to be in the present and really just enjoy the small things of life, because you're not constantly trying to fill in that void that you feel within you. And so then you might think, okay, well, that's all good, but does it mean that I shouldn't strive to achieve anything in life? Like, I mean, everybody wants to become a better person. Everybody wants to improve. The idea is not to not have goals anymore, but the idea is to stop always trying to achieve goals to fill that part of you that feels like you're not enough. And so what I mean is that instead of doing things so that you gain a title, so that you own a possession, so that you gain Instagram followers or whatever your thing is, don't do it for that. Just do it for the sake of doing it. So when you're doing something and you're not doing it to get something out of it, that's when you're truly free and you can be truly happy. Because otherwise, when you're guided by that ego, by that feeling of lack, you're always doing something with the goal in mind. And the minute that you stop trying to do things to achieve something all the time, I'm doing this so that I can do this, or I'm doing this so I can achieve that or that or that, the minute you stop doing that, you actually become so much more efficient and so much better at what you're doing, because your mind isn't always crowded by, okay, it has to be like this in the end, or I have to get it done by this time, or that. You can actually focus fully on what you're doing, because you're not doing it for the end goal. You're doing it just for the sake of doing it. And that will tremendously change absolutely everything you do in your life. And this might sound very abstract, but the minute that you have that click inside your head, your life is going to change completely. Okay, so the other part of us that can really cause disruptive thought patterns is fear. So we all have this part of us that is constantly fearing certain things, kind of like this little alarm bell that we have in our heads. And the fear comes mainly from being afraid of being hurt, whether that be being afraid of physical pain, but also being afraid of emotional pain, such as feeling rejected or feeling embarrassed, or the same types of different negative emotions. So basically what happens is that because of this fear that is part of us, just like the ego is part of us and is generating these thoughts that are counterproductive, fear is also constantly generating a bunch of negative thoughts. And it might be very simple things, or it might be a little bit more complex things. So for example, if you need to go outside, I don't know, to get something in your car, and then you start thinking, oh man, it's gonna be cold outside, oh, I'm gonna have to put my boots on, that's gonna be such a hassle. So all of these negative thoughts that are going on in our minds are caused by kind of like the fear, even though it's not like an intense fear, but a certain fear of discomfort that might come with doing something or with living something. Or on the other hand, like for example, another example, if you get up in the morning and you say, oh, I don't want to go to work, that is probably being caused by fear of different negative things that could happen at work, whether it be you're afraid that someone will be mean to you or to get in an argument with someone, or you're afraid that you're not going to be able to accomplish certain things, or you're afraid that people are going to critique what you're doing, or you're afraid that, I don't know, time's gonna go by slowly, that you're gonna be bored. Basically, the reason why, you might think, oh, I don't want to go to work, is because you're afraid of all these different things. But the problem with fear and with all of that is that a lot of the times the thing that we actually fear is not that bad compared to the mental torture that we make ourselves go through when we're thinking about, or when we're anticipating, right? So the minute that you realize that you're constantly kind of torturing yourself by fearing discomfort, fearing rejection, fearing failure, the moment that you realize all that torture that you're doing to yourself and that you let it go, you're going to be so much happier and freer from pain, because the actual pain that is caused by those negative events actually happening is going to be probably less bad in a lot of cases than the pain that you're creating with the anticipation of all of these things. So that's another way that the mind can kind of get hijacked by this negative part of us. And if you start analyzing your thoughts, you're going to realize that you're doing it a lot more than you realize throughout your day and just throughout your life in general. And this is where meditation is a very, very useful key. Because what is meditation? I used to think that meditation was just a matter of like sitting down and relaxing, but that's really not what it's about. Meditation is just a matter of sitting down and then becoming aware of all of those thoughts, of what your mind is doing, becoming aware of the things that are popping inside your head. And then you become aware of them, but then it's practicing to just simply say, oh, that's an interesting thought, and then just let it go. So basically, it's the idea that you practice noticing the thoughts and basically acknowledging that those thoughts aren't you, and then basically just letting those thoughts go. And that's what meditation is. And the more you do that, then the more in your daily life you're able to distance yourself from your thoughts, and you're able to realize that your thoughts are not who you are, and that it's not because you think a certain thing that defines you, or that it's you thinking those things. Because often we think that our thoughts are who we are first, and we think that all the thoughts that we have are true. But what I'm saying is that you are not your thoughts. And so the minute that you realize that, you can kind of distance yourself from them. And that, once again, is also extremely, extremely freeing. So let's try to find an example. If you're thinking, I don't know, if you find yourself thinking something mean about someone, and then you think, wow, why am I thinking that? I'm such a horrible person. You're not, because your thought isn't who you are. The thought is just a thought that was conditioned by a bunch of stuff that happened in your past and your memories, that stuff that you perceive. And the moment you stop saying, oh my God, I'm horrible, obsessing about it, and then your ego comes into it, the moment you just stop there, let it go, say, whoop, that was a bad thought, but just let it go. It's just very, very freeing. And these ideas aren't the easiest to have come across, and that's why I really recommend you to read books like A New Earth. But I tried to do my best here, because once you realize that craziness that is in you, and once you realize that you are not your thoughts, and you start practicing meditation and practicing distancing yourself from those thoughts, you become so much happier and so much freer, and everything you do just has such a better quality, because you're not doing things to constantly try to fill that part of you, that little ego in you.
So if you like this video, I recommend that you read the book A New Earth or the book The Unfettered Soul. There are many books that kind of discuss similar ideas. Those are just two that I personally really liked. So I'll see you in the next video.